Welcome to episode 138 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Today I'm speaking with Frank Shirvinski, whose life journey has taken him from designing satellites at Hughes Aircraft to leading churches to now combining both engineering work and faith-based ministry. Frank's story is one of curiosity, calling, and courage. As a young man, he studied aeronautical and aerospace engineering at Purdue University after he was inspired by the astronauts who had walked on the moon. His career began in the high-tech world of satellites before he shifted into ministry, and that's where he developed a deep love of biblical languages and teaching. Over time, Frank discovered that his purpose was not limited to professional roles. Whether in engineering, pastoring, or writing, he has sought to serve God faithfully in every season of life. Over time, Frank discovered that his purpose was not limited to just one professional role. Whether in engineering, pastoring, or writing, he has sought to serve God faithfully and in every season of life. In our conversation, Frank shares about living with integrity in the workplace, the importance of being prepared to answer other people's questions about faith, and why learning never stops, especially after turning 50. He also talks about how physical health, curiosity, and wise use of time are essential for living with meaning and purpose. To tell us his story in his words, please welcome Frank Shirvinski to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Frank. I really appreciate the time. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes. I understand you have a degree in aeronautical and aerospace engineering. Does that mean you wanted to be an astronaut when you were a kid?
Yeah, I played with it a little bit when I was in high school. The idea of going into the Navy, maybe being a pilot, which I became a pilot later. But yeah, when I was in high school, wanted to get into aerospace. That was the time of the shuttle and our expansion in that way. When I was a kid, it was always the Apollo missions, Apollo 11, and so forth. And so actually I went to Purdue mostly because that's where the astronauts went.
Okay.
We had Gus Grissom Hall. Neil Armstrong was a graduate of Purdue. And it was in the state. I grew up in Indiana, so it was in the state I was in, and it seemed natural to go to Purdue and pursue a degree in aeronautical and aerospace engineering.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Were you a young boy when they were landing on the moon?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
So I was born in 68, so 69.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay. You don't remember any of that, though. That was a big thing when I was in elementary school. You were a pilot, too. Was that in the Navy?
No, I was going to go in the Navy after graduation and met my wife, Stacy, at Purdue within 6 months of graduation. And we decided, instead of doing that, to take a job at Hughes Aircraft Company, which is now Boeing, and in Los Angeles. And I was designing satellites for Boeing, or for Hughes rather. Did some work with that. Also did some work on capturing satellites. We captured one of our satellites and brought it back to Earth in the space shuttle. So that was a fun thing to do, to work on that program. Got to talk to astronauts while they were making those maneuvers and so forth live from the ground, which in those days was a pretty big deal. Yeah, I worked at Hughes Aircraft Company for a couple of years, and then, to be honest, got really tired of California. Super expensive, super busy. It's hard. You couldn't afford a house. You couldn't afford land. So we ended up leaving. I got a job as the vice president of engineering at a company in Atlanta that did thermal products, heat shields, and stuff like that for both airframes, but also for spacecraft as well. And I did that for a few years before going to seminary.
So you went into the seminary?
Yeah, after a couple of 3 years at the company in Atlanta, we started really returning to church more. And as I went to church, I was kind of like learning stuff. And I also felt like I'm not learning everything. And I had a lot of questions. And there were not a lot of answers, unfortunately. So I thought what I usually do whenever I don't know things. And by the way, I've always been that kind of curious person. So like when I was in school and they would say, here's Pythagorean's theorem, I'm like, I'm going to prove it. I was never one to just write down the equation. I tended to try to derive the quadratic equation or whatever it was. So I understood it for myself. So I decided to take some Bible classes at a local Bible college, Atlanta Christian College, in my lunch hours. So I really enjoyed that. I really got into it. I really thought I was learning some new things. That's when I had a friend of mine say, you got to go to seminary. So we had just had our first child, Abigail, and she was like 3 months old, and we decided that to take a kind of a step of faith. So we sold our house, our brand new house in Georgia, packed up the kids and moved to Tennessee and attended Emmanuel School of Religion. which is now part of Milligan College in Tennessee, a full grad program, 120-hour master's program. Really got into biblical languages at that point, just because it's foundational. You can read a commentary and see what someone else thought, but again, that whole derivation side of my brain was like, I want to know that too. And so I learned Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, picked up the biblical languages, and really got into teaching. And after seminary, moved from back to Georgia and got a job as an associate minister at the church we left to go to Tennessee. Okay. And we got there. I also started attending Emory University to get a Master of Theology to further my kind of Old Testament background. That's where I really picked up Aramaic. And I also got interested in other languages. And I began to teach at Atlanta Christian College, that school I went to in lunchtime. So I taught Pauline literature, some New Testament there. And after that, I had applied at Emory for their PhD program. And I was accepted, and I was third on the list to get in. However, since I was a male and Caucasian, I was bumped out of that program. That was back in 99, 2000. So I decided, since I couldn't go to Emory, I went to University of Georgia and worked on my PhD in historical linguistics. So I decided to go more generic. So I picked up languages like Gothic and Sanskrit, did more Hebrew and Proto-Indo-European languages, and did that at the University of Georgia while teaching. And it was then that I got a call to come out to Arizona in 2003 to become a transition pastor to a lead pastor in Scottsdale. And so we left Georgia and came out here. Still did some teaching at Fuller Seminary, taught Hebrew for them for a couple of years, and then worked as a minister in Scottsdale.
Well, that's very interesting. Can you still read and write in all of those different languages?
My Greek is pretty good. Hebrew is pretty good. I don't do a lot of Aramaic anymore because there's just not a lot to do there. I don't really do Sanskrit anymore. That's really beyond me. It wasn't all that interesting, to be honest. It was a great language, but very complex and detailed. I still do that for my own studies and any kind of sermon preparation I do. I'm not in the ministry any longer, at least the paid ministry. I'm back in engineering. In about 2018, I really decided that I wanted to serve the church but not be a paid staff member any longer. As churches go along, you end up looking at budgets and you see so much of it goes to salaries and stuff like that. And what we were trying to do at Chaparral was, one of my goals was that the money that came in on Sunday, all that money, would go out in missions of some sort. The local community, Haiti, we had a big mission in Haiti, stuff like that. And so we developed businesses on our church campus. So we had a CrossFit gym that was doing very well. We had like 150 members. We opened a coffee shop that was open during the week. We started a preschool and a charter school. So we had all these things we're building to use our campus for revenue so that we could then, again, have this goal of like when you gave on Sunday, you gave to the stuff that Jesus was most passionate about, taking care of the poor, the hungry, stuff like that. We developed that program, and one of those things was, okay, like I'm part of the problem, right? I'm taking more than I'm from the salary side of things. I went to flight school up at Deer Valley Airport, got my pilot's license, commercial license, instrument license, and eventually got a job at JSX Airlines after being an instructor for about a year and a half. Flew for them for 3 whole months before the pandemic hit.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and so, of course, at that point, a lot of the flying dried up for a couple years. And then something miraculous happened. I called my old boss from Hughes. So it's been 25 years at this point. So I talked to him. I said, hey, I'm looking for something to do until the airlines come back. I thought maybe I'd get back in engineering for a couple of years, stuff like that. Do you know of anybody? We have Northrop Grumman here in Gilbert. Maybe I can get a contact with them and do some work for them. He said, no, why don't you come work for me? I got a new company I'm starting. You can work from home, and you'll be one of our lead design engineers. I'm like, okay, hold on. It's been 25 years since I've done this stuff. Oh, you were great back then. You'll be great now. So he was very faithful, very kind, very generous. Took a job with them, and I've been doing that ever since. So it's 2025 now. It's been about 5 years I've been with the company, and that's going really well, and designing satellites again, and from the ground up, and it's been a lot of fun.
That sounds like a God thing, to be honest.
I couldn't agree with you more.
He puts your old boss in your mind after that many years, and you call him up, and he says, "Yeah, come work for me." That's just putting you in the right place at the right time. So
Yeah, it was
super.
definitely one of those. We've had a couple of times in our life, I'm sure you have too, where you're like, yeah, God was in that. Like when we sold our home to move to Tennessee, that had to happen on a certain day. On that day, it happened, right? Same thing with this. To call someone and say, I've got 25 years of a gap in my business knowledge. You want to hire me? Yep. And it's been really good. And it's allowed me to do other things in ministry like that actually wanted to do, to help out at churches by speaking if they needed someone to fill in or to write books, different things like that. So it's been actually a true blessing. It's kind of what I was looking for previously.
I've interviewed a number of pastors who are bivocational on this show, and it
Hmm.
sounds like that was what you were moving into, is still wanting to serve God, but also be in the marketplace. And
Yeah,
this
I do. Yep.
job offers you the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one
So
thing about being a minister too, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is that you become very insulated from people. You're with your church, your stuff, that's your world, and people in the marketplace aren't in your world as much. Now, when we had the CrossFit gym, we did get a lot of that. We had the gym was at the church in a building on the church, but it was a completely independent CrossFit gym. It operated that way. It was not a nonprofit. It was meant to, and we paid rent to the church, by the way. That's kind of part of the deal. And that's why we did it. And we did it so that people would come for the CrossFit gym and then meet the church, meet Jesus in that environment. And that did work very well. And you get to know people, you saw them every day or every other day at the gym. And so that was good for us to do that. That gym is still running.
and so
Hmm.
now you're still designing satellites, which I think
I
is
am.
just fascinating. That
Yeah.
technology has improved by leaps and bounds since you first started in it, I'm sure.
Yes and no. Aluminum's still aluminum, titanium's still titanium. A lot of those things are the same. The way we construct them hasn't changed all that much. What's changed a lot is the technology inside of
Hmm.
software, computers, stuff like that. So what you're seeing now is instead of the big geosynchronous birds you're going to have with direct TV or something like that, you're seeing a lot more of the low Earth orbiting Starlink type vehicles, smaller, faster. They're built in 8 months, not 3 years. A lot of that's changed too. SpaceX has changed that game quite a bit with their Falcon 9 launch vehicle. Now you have a quicker way to space, a less expensive way to space. So you see a lot more companies jumping on that too.
What kinds of things do your satellites do, or is that classified?
Some of it's classified. So I do have a top secret clearance. So that's something that I got to be kind of careful of. You're looking at observation of things or communication. Those are the two big things. You don't see a lot of TV kind of stuff anymore. It's going to be mostly cell, satellite, stuff like that, and then just observation. There is work going toward the moon, looking at ideas of like how to put GPS on the moon, so those kinds of things. So there's a lot of different programs out there that are testing the limits of new technologies.
That is really fascinating, to be honest with you. I
Hmm.
know that the whole satellite thing has changed. Starlink has been a game changer. It used to be that kind of internet service through satellite was really clunky, relatively slow, etc. But people I know who've been using Starlink now have just rave about it at its speed and its availability.
Yeah, we have it at the house since I work online using CAD, which is a huge computer centric program. We have optic for the house, but we've also have a Starlink backup. So we have both.
Wow.
And to be honest, when you switch back and forth, you really don't know it. It's so we have half our stuff at the house is on Starlink, other half is on your traditional ground-based internet.
That's cool. Was expressing your faith in the workplace ever an issue for you?
No. In the business today, it's not one of those things that you talk about a lot. It just becomes more of how you behave, how you act, how you treat people, and then they see something's different. And then you got to realize too that with social media, whether you're for it or against it, it's a game changer. And so if someone says, "Boy, that's a really nice guy," they look you up, right? Or they Google search you and they say, "Oh, there's a bunch of sermons from this guy." And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff that happens. And so you don't need to be, "Hi, my name is Frank. You didn't hear about Jesus." It's more of like they come to you with questions. That's how I see the workplace working itself out today. And the flip side's true too. If they Google you and they say, "Oh, Greg got this great podcast, and he goes to church every Sunday, and he's a great Christian," he just cussed out this person at the office. Not that you would do that, but it goes both ways. And so you have to really be good about. And the other thing too, especially with remote workers, so much is done over like Teams or different chat type based programs or audio only calls. that you got to be much more aware of how things are taken, and much more careful about your language and how you say things. Something meant as a joke that I say to you face to face may not come across that way. So that's changed things a lot. I don't use a lot of social media. I don't have a Facebook or Instagram account. I'm not allowed to have TikTok, for example, because a lot of those programs are used for nefarious purposes by foreign governments. So because of our business, we don't do those things. So it's been like a very refreshing thing not to have those. But that being said, that's something that does change how you are perceived in the workplace. A lot of older adults, I think, don't always understand that what you say on the internet is forever. What you
Exactly.
post on Facebook is forever. And I'll guarantee you, if you have a new client or a new customer or a new supplier, they're going to check your LinkedIn, they're going to Google you, they're going to know something about you. And that influences just about everything.
I would agree with that. I liked
Mhm.
something you said a little bit earlier, reminded me of a Bible passage that we should always have an answer at the ready. So when
Mhm.
people see us being different and they ask those questions, you should be able to answer them.
Absolutely, which is why I think it's so important, and this is where kind of the minister side of me comes out. I understand that for churches it's important to reach out to new believers, and usually Sunday mornings in most churches are very focused on what we call seekers, and you're
Hmm.
probably very aware of that. However, we've also found statistically that people very rarely make the change from the seeker to the deeper believer. So when someone comes to them and says, "Hey, I'm Catholic," or "I grew up in this kind of faith tradition, I have a question about X," and you're like, "Oh, I have no idea." It's really, I think, incumbent upon us to have answers, which means we have to do the study, which means we have to do the work, which we have to have groups and small groups, whatever, that actually study and not just, "Hey, how's it going this week? How's your life?" That really get into the Bible and church history and whatever. So that's where I've been kind of putting my focus. I know a lot of young people in my life that call me regularly. "Hey, I have a question about something and no one can answer it for me." Not that I have all the answers, but at least I'll do the research, I'll find out, and I'll give them an answer, or at least what I perceive as an answer. So there's a lot of humility in it, but there's also got to be a lot of being able to help people answer these questions because they have got a lot of questions. And where they're going to go is to the internet, and they're going to look up some person who's saying whatever and with no real filter. And the internet's full of good and bad information. It's information, right? What ends up happening is it's going back to an old concept of trust. You have to be with them in their life so they trust you and you're trustworthy to share information and to help them through study. And so to be prepared in and out of season, as the Bible says,
Hmm.
requires us to do that work. We have to do that work.
That,
And that requires the churches to make those available.
that's a great segue into what you're doing now, and that's writing books and faith-based
Yeah,
books and stuff like that. Tell us about them.
my daughter and I, she's my oldest child, we started,
Abigail?
Abigail, yep, we started something called Purpose Press. And the idea is to make resources available to people, different kinds of resources. So she put out a prayer journal for women to encourage folks to just pray, to sit down, write down concerns and things, and spend time in prayer. We've also put out some children's books, and the children's books were graphically produced by someone in Ukraine to support them. And but the books are very biblically based about a girl named Rosie and her experiences, and they've got a biblical message. And what they're designed to do is you read them with your child, and at the end there's like a question or two that you can explore with them. And so we've got Rosie and the Rattling Cup, which is a story about my daughter and I. We went into a baseball game, and we were leaving the baseball game. It was in Atlanta, and I saved the ticket. In the back of the book, you'll see a photo of the ticket. We were going. She was probably 5 or 6. That's how Rosie's based on that. And we're going to this game, and we're holding hands, and we're talking about the game, and she's all excited about it. And there's a guy in a wheelchair, and he's got a cup, and he's shaking it, with change in it, looking for money for his wheelchair. And so I walked by, put some money in the cup, and just kept on walking. I didn't really interact with him. I didn't say hi to him. I just walked on. And so she grabs my hand, and she says, "Dad?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Who was that?" And the question just stuck with me. I'm like,
Wow.
I gave him what he wanted. I didn't get to know him. I didn't ask him
Hmm.
who he was, his name. I didn't say hello. I didn't do anything. I just like, here, and went on. And it really shaped my idea of generosity and hospitality. And here it was, this 5, 6-year-old that taught me this profound lesson. And that lesson gets captured in Rosie and Rattling Cup. And the second book we did is called Rosie Finds Joy. It's about Thanksgiving and having friends and the whole dichotomy of when you go to Thanksgiving dinner and you sit at the big table or the kids' table. And the idea of it's who you're with, not the fancy silverware. Again, very simple lessons that might be relatable for them.
That's really, I really like that. And the fact that you're doing that with your daughter is neat. And the story about the Rattling Cup, kids are always watching. And it's just like what you were saying before. They're looking at you and they're seeing that there's something different. And it was inquisitive of her to notice that you didn't interact with the individual. You just gave him money. And so she asked you about it. And it turned into a really cool thing. I like that.
Yeah, like I saw the cup, she saw the person. That's
Right. Yes.
that's the difference. In fact, one more quick story. We're going to do a book on this at some point. But in Jonah, the Jonah story, one night I was reading the Jonah story to her, and we're going through the little pictures and all this kind of stuff. And she looked at Jonah and she said, "He looks sad." I'm like, "Yeah, he's sad. He's in the belly of a fish." And she said, "So is he in timeout?" I'm like, "Yeah, for 3 days. He was in timeout for 3 days." That's exactly the point of the story. He was in timeout. So kids have this way of seeing the world, and just spending time with them in scripture and with the biblical stories is really helpful to them because they're on it. You're right.
That's right. And what a great opportunity for people over 50 to be able to pour into the next generation. We can do that with our grandkids and with the neighbors around us, etc., and just start giving them those fundamentals.
Absolutely. There's enough negative stories and negative information out there. When you get your grandkids, we have one on the way, our first one, and that's going to be exciting. They come over, you pull out a book, and you sit and read to them instead of giving them an iPad and saying, "Go watch this." And those three moments I just mentioned to you are like life shaping, and they're small, they're unplanned,
Right.
they just happen. And so yeah, reading to your grandkids, kids, super important. So we want to make resources for that. And we have a new one coming out hopefully in the next 6 months. The other things we're put together is I've got a small group books coming out this month. It's in pre-order now, but it's called Toward the Horizon. And what these are designed to do is to help not just small groups, but leaders of small groups. When I was a minister, and I see this at the churches, is that people are called to be a small group leader or want to be a small group leader, and they feel like, I don't have any resources. And often what happens is they're given some videos or they'll watch something in Right Now Media. Again, nothing against that, but they watch a video and they just say, "What did you think?" And no one's really taking the next step. Or you get a group that's what I call like this, I don't mean this in a negative way, but like a shared ignorance model where you're like, "What did you think? What did you think?" "Oh, I don't know." And there's no like pulling together. So what these books do is there's a participant's guide. There's 10 lessons. They're all independent. They're from the Gospel of Matthew. They don't go through the book per se, but they're meant to be independent. So if you miss a week, you're fine. But there's a general question like, when's the time you've been in a trail and you've found something remarkable? Then there's a set of questions that go through a passage of the Bible, and then a couple application questions. And there's one more piece that's really important. I added a story section to every lesson. That's more of what you consider like a sermon illustration, but it's a story about the story. It's a story about the biblical story that's personal, reflective, and someone who's not the Bible confuses me kind of person, or they're not like a one follow lesson kind of person, can read the story and get the point and interact in the small group. "Oh, in the story, he said this and it was really cool," and whatever. That's kind of the idea there. So it adds this element of story because our culture today, because of the media, is so story driven. In fact, if you think of like sermons you've listened to, when you walk away, most often, what you remember most are the stories that were told. Okay. Or the jokes if they were bad. Anyway, so there's these stories. And so then the leader's guide has the same questions, the same stories driven piece, but it has answers to the questions. And the answers are written such that they learn how to do the Bible study themselves. So they've answered the question themselves, looked at what I wrote, which is not like just a commentary. It's more of a, here's how you think through it. And some lessons will be like a word study. Some lessons will be a context study. Some lessons will be a connection story. So we teach them how to study the Bible in different ways without saying it.
Okay.
And then there's some suggestions there for how to lead your group, how to get someone who's not talking, how to get someone who's talking too much to stop talking, to help groups become more healthy. We have this Matthew set coming out. It'll be followed by 10 lessons in Genesis, followed by 10 more in Matthew, and we'll continue to develop them that way.
Are the stories that you're talking about in this book the extra stories, are they based on that particular scripture or are they related to it?
A little bit of both. It'll be, of course, related, and it'll quote the scripture in the story, and the point's the same,
Okay.
but it maybe takes something a little more relevant to their life and kind of shows how this kind of folds into that.
So,
I call them waypoints, and they're like maybe 5, 6, 7 pages long, or they'll pull in something different to show a contrast. What I'm trying to do in these books is to think about the Bible in different ways, because you
mhm.
may get, what does this word mean? That's one way of looking at it. What does this story mean? How does the story fit in with the larger context of the whole book? So to think about it in a practical way, that's what these are designed to do. So hopefully they'll make them better teachers and better learners. And that's what this is designed for.
And how does this story that was written 2,000 years ago apply to me today?
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
neat. So that is the Toward the Horizon, the one that's coming out here in the next couple of weeks. And then you
Mhm.
have Before the Day Ends as well. That was another opportunity to go into Bible study too. Is that right?
Yeah, I wrote that one during the pandemic when I wasn't flying. And that's just a book of meditations with some questions at the end. So you can use that book as a small group study too. However, it's going to be updated in the next year. Just because when it was written, it had some things that were focused on what the nation was going through, what the world was going through at that time. And I want to make it a little bit more generic. As we get farther from the pandemic, those people won't necessarily remember some of that stuff. So I want to clean that up a bit. But some are long stories, some are short, and but it's more of a devotional thing. And by the way, the Toward the Horizon, the Leader's Guide can be used as an individual study. So if you're not in a small group and you're getting going, you want to do something, you can get that and use that as a personal Bible study too.
Well, that's cool. So Before the Day Ends talked about 7 opportunities where we can find hope and strength. And all of those opportunities were pretty much related to COVID and the pandemic. And you want to broaden that into more of a general kind of
Yeah,
thing? Okay.
it wasn't just like COVID. I didn't mention COVID per se, but I
Okay.
did talk about isolation, talked about finding community, talked about some things on that, and also finding courage. There are a lot of people that were very afraid, very
Hmm.
scared, very unsure, very uncertain. And so that's what its focus was. And it talked about prayer, it talked about, and each story was independent. It was meant to be more of like today I'm going to sit down and think about this. But I do want to make it just a little bit more just generic in a
Okay.
sense. I want to add some new stories into it. I want to change a couple stories out and just clean some things up in it too.
Okay. It still sounds like a great opportunity for people to dive into because some of those things that you mentioned, like courage and isolation, those are timeless. Those are big problems impacting our country today,
Oh,
especially
for
for
sure.
seasoned citizens. It's the isolation is killing more of them than anything else.
I
Okay.
100% agree with you. Yep.
Super. And then I understand you have a brand new book coming out soon called The Trail. But
Yeah,
that's, yeah.
this one's 20 years in the making. So this is I can't really there, you kind of see it. And so this one I'm having printed. It's so big it's 2 volumes, unfortunately. It's 600 pages long. But what it does is it takes you through the Bible in 320 days. So roughly 6 days a week. And why I put it together 20 years ago, I was an associate minister and I found that no one was reading the Bible, or when they did, they quit. And what I found was this: they would often get a Bible reading program that said, start in Genesis or start in John and then go through it, right? Chapter by chapter. And they get to Leviticus and they stop. They get to Second Chronicles and they stop. And then I also found that they not only did that, but the chapters that are placed in the Bible often break up the story. So you'd be stuck, and if you skip 2 days, and you're like, "Where was I at again?" And so what I did was I went back and I looked through the entire Bible in the original languages, and so okay, where does the stories end? What's a chunk that's out? Like for example, Genesis 1:1, right? The creation story. If you look at that story, it doesn't end at the end of chapter 1. It goes from Genesis 1:1 through Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, the first half. That's where that story ends. So when you go to the trail, it'll have that as the reading. And it does that for all the Bible. Now, what it also does is it has 4 tracks. A New Testament track. So every day you read from the New Testament all the way through. So you're always
Mhm.
getting something from the New Testament. It has a track from the Torah, so the first 5 books of Moses. It has a track from the prophets and writings. So that would be Psalms, Proverbs, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, so forth. And then I added a 4th track called the Apocrypha. and probably have friends that are Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic. Those books are in their Bibles. Rarely read, but they're there. And the early church used those books. And so I thought for those who are interested, it's been added as well. Now you can read just the New Testament through in a year. You can read just the New Testament and Torah, or whatever combination of that you want, you can do that. Each day takes about 10 minutes to read. So if you have a half hour set aside, excuse me, for devotion, 10 minutes to read, and let's say you double that because you take your time. You have an extra 10 minutes for prayer. I also added a podcast that goes with the book. I'm about through day 42 right now, so it'll be finished before you're done. And each day I comment on one or more of the texts for that day. It could be devotional, it could be more academic, but there's something about one or more of those texts to help you in your reading. And my goal with this book is to encourage Bible readers, encourage Bible seekers. And in fact, in the book itself, when you open up to a page, you'll have your readings on one side with places to make notes, a centering prayer to kind of get your mind thought. Then the right side, there's a section for distractions, for you to write down things that come into your mind as you begin to read that, I got to go and pick up groceries. Write that down, and then you'll come back to it later, right?
Brilliant.
Or I got a meeting at 4 o'clock. Write it down, put it aside. A section for insights, things like, oh man, this really struck me today, or I want to ask a question about that, and a section for questions. So if you have a few friends who are reading together, you could sit down once a week and you can go through and I had a question about this. What do you think about this text in Exodus or whatever? This was designed for that purpose. Excuse me. Is to encourage Bible reading, Bible exploring, not to be overburdensome, but also that one day, by the way, you may have just 2 readings because they're longer. Because to honor the story, you may have a long section out of Psalms, for example, and one short one out of the New Testament. The next day you may have 4 little sections. It's all about making it readable and understandable for someone and to actually spend time. It's not a goal like, hey, I read the Bible and check that off my box. It's to actually engage the text and get connected with it. So that's what it's for.
It was in 2017 when a pastor challenged me to read the Bible cover to cover. I had not done that since becoming a Christian in 1995. And that year was the year of the most impactful spiritual growth I ever had, was to get in there and actually read the words. And I remember being in Promise Keepers many years ago where somebody from the stage said, you've got to read the Bible cover to cover because eternity is a long time. And you're not going to be wanting to walk down the streets of heaven and encounter Amos. And he asks you, what'd you think of my book? And you'd never read it.
It was funny. Speaking of that, I don't know if you follow Babylon Bee, but
yes,
I know that Hulk Hogan passed away yesterday or day before. And there was a headline. It's a satire site. And it said, Hulk Hogan arrives in heaven and comes looking for Jacob. Because the wrestling with the angel thing. And so many comments were like, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm like, see, yeah.
That's right. Absolutely. Is the trail more for mature believers? Because it sounds like when you get into some of those extra books that you would need to have some more biblical context to really understand that.
Yes and no. So I added the Apocrypha for the seasoned believers. So those who have read the Bible like you, and what is this other stuff? So it's there to take you that next step. However, for the new believers, having this available and saying, look, just do the New Testament all the way through. Keep the book, go back next year and add the Torah. Read the New Testament again. And what I did in the very beginning of the book, I'm glad you mentioned this, is and I mentioned this in the introduction, I ordered the books in the New Testament with that in mind. So you start with Luke, right, which is the most Gentile-centric book, right? And it ends in Matthew, because Matthew is the most Jewish book. So when you get to Matthew, you've covered almost all the Old Testament. So you've got that context before you get to Matthew. John is in the middle. As you've learned the rhythm of kind of the Paul's letters and some of the Greek philosophy that's underlying some of that, you'll understand John a bit better. So we put it together with a new believer in mind, but also to say, okay, someone who's been to church like you for a long time, wants to get a little deeper, and wants to dig in, it's got that element to it as well.
Okay, wonderful.
But if I had a new believer, I'd say, look, just take this, do the New Testament. Just every day, read through it in the New Testament. If you want to add some stuff, great, that's on you, but just start the New Testament. And then you've got the book. You can just go back next year and open it up and go through it again.
That's neat. I'm certainly adding that to my wish list. That's for
Oh,
sure.
good. I'll get you a copy.
Are these books all published by Purpose Press as well?
They are, yeah.
They
So
are.
we're doing it ourselves, and that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, it allows us to, if we want to gift books, we can. I know my daughter's going to gift a bunch of her prayer journals to a women's shelter, and we're going to do that with a lot of these things. Our goal is not to make money. That's not its purpose. We want to fund the next book. That's kind of the idea. But we want to eventually turn it into a nonprofit so that we could then gift books, and if you have people who want to support can do that. We're working in that direction. But the whole goal is to get the word out and get resources in people's hands. And the same thing goes for the small group guides. If someone says, I want to do a small group, but here, take this and run with it. But then, so Purpose Press is going to be designed that way. And it also allows us to have more control on content and stuff like that. So we want to keep kind of all that going for ourselves and putting resources out as we see fit. And now with the new ways of doing things, you can use different, like Ingram Spark, Amazon, different self-publishers to do that pretty inexpensively. And you can charge less for the resources. You don't have that corporate
Exactly.
add-on. Some of the books we had to get printed overseas. We wanted lay flat bindings. So when you were, like when in this case, if you're trying to make notes in this, you wanted to lay flat. And so we didn't find publishers here that could do that. So we're getting those printed in the places where we can have that done. So really want it to be a good experience for people. That's the whole goal of this.
That's neat that you're working with your daughter too. I imagine that has some even more special meaning to have you developing this with her and eventually turning it over to her.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is we're obviously two different generations. And so having been in the church and for so long, it's easy for me to get stuck into that thing where she has a lot of friends that aren't Christians and are seeking. And so it's always this balance between who are we writing for, what are we trying to do these for. And so that's been a real blessing to have us bounce things off each other to create that environment.
Right. And it also gives you that male and female perspective. And so many great positive things can come from that. Was she your illustrator for the children's books?
No, we went to someone overseas who she knew that needed some help, financial help. So we decided to pay her to make the illustrations.
Okay.
They're watercolor in the children's books. We did that on purpose too. Her idea. She's, I don't want to use AI. I don't want to use high graphic stuff. I want it to be sweet, simple, more old-fashioned-y, more. And so we went that route with the children's books. She thought that would be really special, and it seems to have done that.
How many kids do you have?
3.
Are the others involved in the business as well?
No, not right now. I've got 2 sons. One is in the Army National Guard, and he works in tech too. But he was in Syria at Tower 22 when they got hit. So he's thankfully okay now. He was injured there, but he got back and he's okay. And then we've got a son our youngest son, who just got married, and he's in tech as well, and doing great, and likes to coach soccer and all those kinds of things.
That's fun. So when you're developing Purpose Press, did that require you to learn anything new, or did it pose any challenges in putting this together?
Yeah. As you get older, you got to keep learning. Like you mentioned, I still translate Greek. It's good for your mind, learning a language, although it's a dead language, and well, at least ancient Greek is. That's important. Learning how to do new things. So starting a press is challenging, and develop a business model, and you're learning how to use Shopify and all these different. So all that's really good. It's also good though too when you're older to bring to the new technology insight and wisdom. We're going to find very quickly here with AI, whether you use ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, that's going to want to do it for you. And you can tell when someone's written something via AI or wrote it themselves. And so AI can't really handle wisdom and logic as well as a human can. And so it's going to be really important for us to be personal, to do the work, to spend time with people as these things develop.
That's good advice as well. Podcasting is learning new technology too. Did that cause any issues for you, or is it something that you're pretty familiar with?
I'm pretty familiar with podcasting. We're at the church. We put out sermons each week and stuff like that. So the technology is pretty familiar to me. It's just gotten a lot easier, as you've probably seen, as you get new software and things can go a lot better. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to focus on content, and that's probably the hardest part.
If you could roll the clock back at all, is there anything you'd do differently in your life?
My wife and I talk about that a lot. I think the one thing we would have done differently is homeschooled longer. We homeschooled for the first 5 or 6 years and then put them in public school whenever we got, or charter schools, like some went to. But even that, just spending the time with them was much more important. And also, too, at those ages, to control what they learn and to control insight and wisdom, very important. I think if we we're going to do anything again, it would be definitely homeschooling them. In fact, when our daughter was pregnant, that's the thing. She's going to be homeschooled by her grandparents and her. That's where we're headed with that. So education is so critically important. And I think that taking an active role in that is very important.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that as well. Do you have any advice for people over 50 who may be struggling with what to do with their life to give it more meaning and purpose?
Of course, there's the faith component, right? Everything revolves around that. And that goes with your work, or if you're not working, if you're retired, whatever you're doing, to quote the scripture, how are you doing it for the Lord? That has to be paramount, because if not, you're just doing stuff. So I would say two things that have impacted me recently. One, learn something new, get involved in people's lives. If you see an issue or a problem, find a way to fix it, find a way to get involved in that. Otherwise, you're just complaining, right? So I see a lot of people online complaining and griping about stuff. What are you doing to fix it? What are you doing so find a way to fix it? I know a friend of mine he's over 50, he's going to go be a lawyer. I'm like, cool, that's a great idea. Go be a lawyer. You're never too old to stop learning. And I think that's very important. The second thing is I'd say stay healthy and active. I see a lot of older adults who sit a lot. I think sitting is going to be our new smoking.
Yes.
And so get a standing desk, start there, and use it. I know a lot of people have standing desks that sit at the bottom setting all the time. Be physically active. All those are really important things. Get a hobby, just move. And then of course, eating goes along with that too. The third thing is control what goes into your body. And that isn't just food. Yes, food is important. I think we're seeing more and more that our food is pretty yucky when it comes to the United States diet. So simplify your diet, eat real food. You'll make a huge difference in your life as far as what you can do, how you think, how your brain works. You've got to take care of what you eat. So that's one. But the second thing is what goes into your mind.
Exactly.
My wife and I, several months ago, said, you know what? We're going to completely shut off the TV. It's a sewer that comes into our home. We're going to shut it off. And so we haven't had the TV on in months. And it is amazing how much time you have back. So I did the math. The average American spends 3 to 5 hours on a screen each day. Make that half. Let's say that's 2 hours. Let's say it's just 2 hours for you. That's 7 years of a 70-year life. So almost 10% of your life is spent in front of a screen with your mind shut off. Do something constructive. You've got the time. You're just choosing to use it. So again, what goes in your body? And that's, again, what you listen to, what you eat. All those things are really important for people over 50.
And I like how you're not involved in social media at all, because that can be a real sewer when you get in there, and especially when people are doing the political discussions and talk about not having ability to impact anything. That's it right there, where you just lose yourself arguing with strangers over pointless things when there's so many other things you can be doing with your skills, talents, and abilities than doing that. And that's why I like your story, because it's bringing all of that together. Your passion, your education, and your job experiences, technically, to put together in serving others in this way.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
How can people connect with you since you don't have social media?
Yeah, you're free to email me at my Gmail account. I think I gave that to you. That's perfectly fine to share.
Why don't you do it again?
Yeah, it's Frank.Shirvinski, SHIR, V as in Victor, INSKI, @gmail.com. Also, you can go to Purpose Press, is purpose-press.com. That's our website. There's a sign-up box there. They'll put in our list, and we'll send information to you there. And then we've got another thing. It's same address, purpose-press.store. And that store is our online store. And you can sign up there. Also, I've got a discount code for your listeners. If they type in forward50, the word forward and the number 50, they get 10% off whatever they order at the store for being part of your podcast.
Cool as that. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're welcome. But yeah, you can interact with me there, and we're gonna be adding more content to the website as time goes on. We're just trying to get things rolling with that. I keep it simple for now. But yeah, if you sign up there, you'll be getting, and we don't send a lot of notifications out. Like once a month, you'll get something from us of something new that's coming out. But I'm very much aware of getting spammed. That's the one way you can check us out there too.
Excellent. And when does the Trail podcast come out?
So it'll come out probably the 1st of August, if not August 15th, when the books arrive. And so when you order a book, you get the podcast comes along with it. And then it'll be online as well. So if you don't have the book, you can still listen to the podcast. It'll be on Spotify. It'll be on Apple.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing your story today with me, Frank. I really appreciate it. I love it. I love what you're doing. I love how you're teaching other Christians and believers to dive into the Bible even more and then to share it with other people.
No, you're welcome. And thanks for all you're doing with your podcast. This is fantastic.
After a successful career in aerospace engineering, Frank Shirvinski is now channeling his passion into writing through Purpose Press. It is a publishing venture he co-founded with his daughter. Together, they have created resources ranging from children's stories like Rosie the Rattling Cup and Rosie Finds Joy to prayer journals, small group guides, and devotional books. His recent release, Toward the Horizon, is designed to help small groups and leaders explore the Bible with greater depth through lessons that blend study, story, and application. Frank also authored Before the Day Ends, a devotional written during the pandemic that focuses on finding courage, community, and prayer in uncertain times. This year, and after 2 decades of development, he published The Trail, a 2-volume reading plan that takes people through the entire Bible in 320 days, complete with companion podcasts. What gives Frank's life meaning and purpose today is not simply the work he does, but the people he serves and the wisdom he shares. He finds joy in mentoring younger believers, partnering with his daughter in ministry, and creating resources that help others engage with Scripture more fully. Frank believes purpose after 50 comes from staying curious, continuing to learn, caring for your health, and using your gifts to serve others and to glorify God. His story is a reminder that it's never too late to start something new, and that even in later seasons of life, our faith, skills, and creativity can combine to leave a lasting legacy. That's all for this week's show. If you'd like to start living a more meaningful life, I encourage you to download our free guide to finding purpose, which is available at www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening, and if you like this show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.